But it was literally the first thing I would see every day when I would wake up, and the last thing I'd see every time I'd go to sleep. So I was like constantly just absorbing different ideas and different themes.
Welcome to the very first Writing Compelling Fiction podcast. And I have a super special guest for my first edition of the podcast. It is my daughter, Mandy, who is way more talented than me and a way better writer and just amazing in so many different ways. She's actually a musician, and we're going to talk about storytelling in terms of lyrics and in terms of books, because I think that there's so much you can learn from other media that you can use in your novels and in your music or whatever else you choose to use to tell a story. So thanks for being my first guest, Mandy. No pressure because I
Yeah,
was your
yeah,
mom.
yeah. You're sucking up a little.
Right? No, I literally do tell people that I think that you are a stronger writer than me. You have such a really evocative way of writing, and you do short form. I do really long form, but your short form is so incredibly powerful. How long has it been that you've been writing your own music?
I was writing songs before I knew how to like play any instruments. And the whole reason I wanted to learn how to play an instrument was so that I could like write more songs. I mean, I have lyrics that go back to like I think I was like 11 or
Wow.
12.
You're humble about it, but you learned tons of instruments. Like you can play piano and drums and ukulele and guitar and clarinet and not saxophone, trombone. You've learned a ton of instruments. So you know a lot about music structure and the way music goes together in general because you learned so many instruments.
Which is funny because above all of that, I still am not proficient at all at reading music. For the most part, everything that I do is just based off of like what sounds good to me, like what works for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so like it is a longer process to do it that way, but I do like the advantage of not thinking about how does this note, how should it resolve, or like what should this chord progression be. I have my own little way. It's not correct, but it's my way.
Which is exactly the same thing you do with writing. Like I teach structure all the time because you need to know how the structure works. Like you know how the structure of music works, how a bridge works, how a harmony works, all of those things. But the best kind of writing for books at least comes for me from when I'm not thinking about the structure and I'm writing from my gut, which is super hard to learn, to just let go of. I need to show, not tell. I need to have, I need to not use adverbs. I need to have a plot point here and this needs a twist. People get so caught up in worrying about all of the rules that they forget to write from their gut. And that's where all the emotion and everything is. For those that don't know, we did write two books together back when Mandy was a teenager, The Cellar and The Well. Funny story behind this. We did it under a pen name, AJ Witten, because I didn't want people to be able to track my daughter down because she was a teenager. And then when the books came out, it says it's a pseudonym for Shirley Jump and her daughter. And I was like, okay,
I
that didn't
think when
help
they
us at all.
interviewed us for one of the newspapers, they even said what high school I went to.
Right, which we did want. The
So,
whole goal was to protect your privacy. We did a couple books. We did them for Houghton Mifflin. Scholastic looked at the first one. They didn't ultimately end up picking it up, but it was a lot of fun, and we learned how to kind of write together. How did you progress into writing like real songs that you wanted to record?
well, to me, like music, like lyrics are a mixture of poetry and storytelling. I've like come to realize that above all else, I just enjoy writing. And music is just like a nice little extra like bonus to go with that. I first started writing with the intention of writing a full song. So I do like a verse and a chorus and blah blah blah. And I've like really struggled doing it that way. I was journaling a lot and it was very much just like I'm just writing. And it was basically like a diary, but it would just be about anything. And I would go back and pull from that. One of our most popular songs, I actually like the very first line is from a journal entry that I had. So that made me like change the way that I thought about like how I go about writing lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have like a really chaotic, crazy process where I have like huge notebooks that I use to like write down as much inspiration as I can, whether it's like one word or like a line from like another song I like or whatever. I will then go through and think of like every other like word or whatever that can associate with that word. One of my favorite tools to use is actually a word associations website where I put in a
Mm-hmm.
word and it gives me a ton of different things that could be associated with that word. And that gives me a lot of ideas when I'm coming up with like metaphors or similes or anything like that, so I don't have to think about it as hard. And then after I like write like a one or two whole pages of just like brainstorming, then I start to like pull from that and think, okay, this has like a lot of potential to really add to and like build a story from. This doesn't really fit with that, and take it from there. But most of my songs, normally there's some sort of theme, whether that's a metaphor or like I'm telling a story, there's always an objective in mind.
Now, when you started writing, was the first song that you actually performed and sang part of your band, Funayure? Am I saying it wrong? I'm probably saying it
It's
wrong.
okay. You're like
It's so hard. It's
overemphasizing the
got the
syllables.
little
You're
thingy.
trying. And you know what?
It's
I think
fine.
I even say it wrong sometimes. It's okay. Because I used to do like a solo act and I had maybe like 6 or 7 songs, maybe. I did it by myself for years. I hated doing it that way. So eventually like other like musicians joined and they're like, hey, like we could do like a full band with you and like on stage, like it's your songs and we just perform them. Like that's awesome. But they were like extremely educated, had a lot of experience, and they were the ones who were like, none of this makes any sense. They're like, what key is this in? I'm like, I don't know. So eventually that like ended up like fizzling. It just wasn't working for me anymore. And it was Rob, like my bandmate in
Mhm.
Funayure, that approached me. At least that's the way I tell it. The way he tells it is I was approaching him over and over and over again to make music together. But eventually we just like got together, and I think the first time we got together, we wrote and recorded and finished an entire song.
Wow.
Almost every single week we would finish an entire song in one day until we had an album done. And then we just kept going from there. We don't do songs nearly as quickly anymore. Back then I was just trying to like write down my stuff. Like it was a way of me, it was like a coping skill for me. I was going through a hard time.
Mhm.
And so I was just trying to like get things out. I wasn't thinking about the longevity of the songs, but now it's much more intentional. Now I try to write with keeping in mind like how is this going to age like for
Mhm.
me, and like how impactful is this really? How effective is it at showing like the emotions and like telling a story?
It's basically the maturity that most people get as a writer writing short stories or novels or whatever else they're writing. Like in the beginning, you're really just trying to figure out how you write, how you
Hmm.
tell a story, because some people outline a lot. I hate that. If I know the ending, I have no desire to write the book. So for me, like I wrote the 10 books in 8 years before I sold one. And a lot of that was me just figuring out how I write a book or how a book goes together. And as I've gotten further in my career, just like you, I've wanted to refine what I do and make it better with every single book and every single paragraph and every single page and put more of myself into it, because I think that's what people relate to. I talk about it all the time on the channel. You have to connect with the reader, and you do that by tapping into things that everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
So we've picked some songs that have like real personal meaning to you. We picked just a few of your catalog. How many do you guys have all together?
3 albums, and we just put out an EP.
So how many songs total is that?
Um, Probably like close to 36, 30
Wow.
something. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And those can be all found on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, all of the platforms. But the most money that goes to the performers comes through buying the songs on Bandcamp, right?
Yes. And
Yes.
our EP right now that we just put out, all of the money that we make from that is actually being donated to a local organization that helps immigrant and refugee families. So that's one that I would love for people to buy. Otherwise, like, yeah, I would love for people to listen.
And we'll have the links to everything down in the description, and I'll put them on the screen and stuff too. So, Wrath, I loved Wrath. You said you talked about your anxiety and depression in this and how you were just like too much for people. But the imagery, what I'm so impressed with that you do in your music is the imagery, because you've got in the chorus, they walk on eggshells, I crash through walls.
They walk on eggshells. I crash through walls.
And if you just take that apart as a writer or as a reader, the imagery is just beautiful. You know, it's like somebody that's really scared of upsetting you, the you in the song, and then you've got like the Kool-Aid man like coming through the
Yeah.
wall, you know. But it's really beautiful, and you captured so much in what, 9 words. It's amazing. So tell me a little bit about the thinking between for Wrath.
Wrath is actually a song that wasn't written for Funayuri. I wrote that when it was still just me.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob and I like reworked it a little bit. So that was one that was like kind of like left over from a really like dark, dark time for me, as you can like tell
Mm-hmm.
from the content of that song. But Man, I don't really remember much of like what I was thinking when I wrote it. I think I literally was just writing without thinking. I wish I still had the notes from writing that, but it was so long ago. I don't think I do. But they walk on eggshells, I crash through walls. I think that was one of the first things that I thought of, and like it all just
Mhm.
like fell into place from there.
And I love the running through mud never fast enough part because that so many of us feel that mentally that
Hmm.
like you're really trying to just pull yourself out of the mud.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like the imagery, the whole thing with the mirror show our demons, mine look like me
Mirror show our demons. I look like me.
is like heartbreaking. Like for me as a mom, a lot of your songs are heartbreaking to me. And I just want, when I hear it, I just want to run over and give you a big
I'm
hug.
on antidepressants now. Like it's okay.
Pharmaceuticals are a good thing. But no, but like I see the pain that you went through that I may not have noticed because we all get caught up in our own crap, right? And we always think I could have done a better job here or there. I think it's pretty powerful. The other thing that I really, really love that you do, and it's something that I just talked about in my last two videos, is you do a lot of juxtapositions of negatives and positives or the flip side of different things. Like in Empress, you've got forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest. You've got begging you, pretty please. You are fresh air. I'm suffocating. That you are fresh air. I'm suffocating line is such a great juxtaposition and imagery that people can understand. So, Empress, you said, was about being in love with someone that you shouldn't be, right? Like that
Mhm.
wanting, that desire for something you can't be.
Yeah.
What you also do is you really tell a story with that, right? With Empress, you start with, I'll tell you a secret, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest. And right there, you've hooked the listener with what you're telling in this story, and I like that. You naturally do this storytelling thing that is so hard for me to teach other people to do, but you build that connection right away because you've got the hook. I'll tell you a secret, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest, and then boom, here's the connection with the listener. I tried so hard to fight these feelings. Some mistakes are worth repeating. Like we all have been there and can relate to that. Are you consciously thinking about that when you're writing a song? Like, I need a hook. Now I need something to connect with people.
No, I actually never, ever, ever think about the audience or listeners ever. My goal is always how do I take these feelings and emotions that I'm writing about, and how do I like explain what that actually feels like? Because when we're sad, we're not like in our head saying like, "Wow, I feel sad." It's like, no, like I'm like devastated. Like, what are the
Mm-hmm.
actions that you're doing when you're sad? Like you're like staying inside like in bed, you're not reaching out to your friends, you're isolating, like or like anger, like what does that feel like in your body? So I try to keep it interesting, and I want it to accurately represent like what it actually feels to me. I never think about what the listeners care, like what they would like, because I always think if I'm true to like what I feel, if I'm being authentic, that there's people out there that will relate to that. And if somebody can tell that like I'm trying to like cater to like what the audience wants or the listeners want, like it's going to be obvious from a
Right.
music standpoint. And then that's also like I don't want to do that. That eliminates the purpose of like why this is my passion. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing it for somebody else. This is I'm doing this for me. Yeah, I don't really think about it in that way. I do try to think of making sure that it's organized, like tells a
Mm-hmm.
story and like has some sort of progression. And then also just try to eliminate like filler essentially. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want every word to be impactful and meaningful. I don't want it to be filled with a lot of boring, like 3 or 4 letter words. Like I want to really use up that space as best as I can.
It's not just about getting that rhyme at the end. It's really, really painting a picture. I have something to confess. I wish you were with me instead. Be the one lighting my cigarette. Inhaling your smoke is as close as I'll get.
Something to confess. I wish you were with me instead. Be the one lighting my cigarette. Inhaling your smoke is as close as I'll get.
That captures that longing and that being in that person's periphery and having to watch them live their life without you being the one that's right next to them.
Yeah.
And again, it's like so heartbreaking. Like it makes me want to cry. We've all been there. We all understand that. The other thing that you deal with a lot in a lot of your songs is like toxic relationships or painful relationships. In Empress, you've got someone put your fire out. Who will burn my bridges now? You talk a lot about the fallout from toxic or narcissistic kind of relationships.
That's actually, I think, my favorite line I've ever written is if
Oh,
someone put your
really?
fire out, who will burn my bridges now? I thought that was so genius when I wrote it. Such a difficult but like beautiful song for me to write
Mhm.
because it was like this other person I'm writing it about was like they were in a toxic relationship. And so I was like trying to get at like your fire has been put out.
Mhm.
Like how would this ever even happen anyways? And yeah, I guess the who will burn my bridges now, like I subconsciously just relate that to like, oh, like this has to go down in flames. Like I just was
Right.
wired to think that way.
Well, and it's also part of what some unhealthy relationships do, right? They burn bridges with the people around you. They burn bridges between the two people sometimes, like,
Yeah,
and sometimes you're doing it yourself, and sometimes it's because that other person has created an environment that creates burnt bridges. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, and I
yeah.
think it's, and I highlighted a bunch of lines so you can see that like these were the ones that I loved. At the end of that stanza is, I would rather burn than drown. I mean, because
That's actually a callback to another song that
is it?
Rob and I did, but actually was never, we never put out.
I am always in awe when people can put words together in a way that creates such a beautiful picture, and you do it in 5 words. And I'm not just saying this because I'm your mother, because I mean I love the music that you write. I just love how beautiful it is, and that's a big reason why I keep saying that you write better than I do, because you do these images and this painful vulnerability that I really struggle with getting on the page. I really have a hard time with tapping into the stuff in my past, the stuff in my head to get it on the page. And you have kind of worked your entire young adult like issues out on in your music, basically.
Well,
Everything that you've gone through.
I have an advantage because when people are reading your books, like they're actually reading the words that you
Mm,
write. Like when I'm writing lyrics, like when people listen to music, a huge portion of people who listen to music aren't looking up the lyrics or like thinking like, oh wow, like putting the pieces together. So I used to be much more like guarded and obscure until I realized like nobody is actually really truly like listening. And the people that
mhm,
do are like appreciating it. That sort of just like set me free. And now
mhm.
I will put it all out there. And it's insane to me some of the things that people will miss. The people I'm writing these songs about, a vast majority of them, I've heard these songs and they aren't
Mhm.
putting two and two together.
Right. That is about
So
them.
then I was like, I can get away with anything here. So.
Wait, is there one about your mom?
I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to read the lyrics.
Right? I've been reading all the lyrics here. I don't think so. The mood that you're trying to get across has been noticed by like the media. What's Up did a review of your EP, and they talked about how your music is both melancholy and bittersweet. It makes you feel like you're not alone in the world when you start listening to a song like that. And maybe people aren't paying attention exactly to the lyrics, but it's the messaging
Mhm.
that connects with them. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody's sitting there remembering a single paragraph of any of my books, but hopefully they resonate with the character going through these crises or these anxieties and insecurities and the character overcoming it. Your music has evolved so much from your 20s to now your 30s, where it's just becoming as more mature as you've become more mature, and it's showing all of the things that you have learned and changed over the years, which I'm super proud of.
Thank you.
Now, with Living with a Ghost, I loved this first line. Again, it's like a hooky thing, and then it really is a relatable thing. When everybody becomes the sheep you count at night, you name them off one by one. You're so good at goodbye. Everyone becomes the sheep you count at night. Immediately, people get it. Like you're sleepless, you're laying there, you're trying to forget these people, and you can't because you're so good at goodbyes is you're really not, like you're still thinking about them over and over again. And I really liked that intro to that song.
A lot of that was also thinking of like how like superficial a lot of my friendships were
Mm-hmm.
during this time where I would see people and it's all like, oh, hey, so and so, hey, so and so, and that's it. Reminded me of like you're like literally counting sheep, like you see them and then they're gone.
Hmm.
And it's never anything deeper than that. You're so good at goodbyes because that's every hello is a goodbye,
Mm,
essentially, when you're
true.
reading it that way.
And then I noticed with the second stanza of Living with a Ghost, my very favorite poem in the entire world is Love Song of Jail for Proof Rock by T.S. Eliot. And I think you
Hmm.
know it because we've talked about it before. This stanza is so much like that. They speak in whispers I can't hear. I got so used to screams. They laugh at jokes I'll never get. The punchline isn't me. The imagery again that you capture in this, I once was like a dove until they clipped my wings. They locked me in a cage too small and sold it as a dream. There's so much to unpack, like gaslighting and how things work, and you captured it so well.
One of the things that is always in the back of my mind is this quote. I don't know where it originated from, but it has resonated with me so deeply. But it's no one knows the violence it took to become this gentle.
Mm,
And that really like came to the front of my mind while writing this one. I had the like they like clipped my wings as like a line in my head, and
mhm,
so I use a dove because they represent like peace and they're very
mhm,
docile birds. Clipping a dove's wings is like it's crazy. Like who does
mhm,
that? The rest like just flew out of me
mhm.
like as soon as I had that figured out.
I feel the same way. Like somebody will ask me, well, where did that line come from? And the first thought is, I don't even think I wrote that. Maybe the copy editor did. And then I go back to the book and I'm like, oh, I did write that line. And like, I have no idea. It just comes from that well that you build by exposing yourself to a lot of different types of music and literature and everything else. And one time when I came to visit you, it wasn't even a bulletin board. It was like just a bunch of ideas up on the wall, which was really cool because it was all things that you had thought of after you read a book because you read a lot as well. And that gives you a lot of inspiration for your music.
The book was called Eros the Bittersweet by Anne Carson. And it's really more of like a study of different literature throughout many periods of time that talks about like not just love, but like the Eros type of
Mm-hmm.
love, which is more so like desire or it's like the gray area. We had an album that I don't think any of these referenced, but it was called Not Forever, But For Now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a concept album that it was all drawn from inspiration from that book. I read through it and I was underlining, I was putting like things that like were important to me on post-it notes, and then apparently a lot was important to me. I mean, it was huge. I think it was like 6 feet long and
Mm-hmm.
like 4 feet tall. It took me like hours to get it down when I moved.
I have a whiteboard here that I never show on my channel because it's such a disaster, but it's covered with post-it notes and things that I've written on the whiteboard and reminders to myself of things that I'm just thinking about. And I
Yeah.
just leave them there, you know?
Yeah. Anytime that I was sort of like stuck or like had like writer's block, I would literally just walk up to the wall and just start reading through them. It gave me so many good like themes and metaphors. Like one was like comparing desire to ice, and the fact that like ice melts and that's why it's desirable is the fact that it's a fleeting thing. Like you have it and then it's gone. I love that book. I've read through it so many times, and I think I've sucked every bit of inspiration out of it that I could, but it was
Well,
super helpful.
when I show people that thing I did for you and your brother that one Christmas, I
Yeah.
took a bunch of rocks from my mother's yard, your late grandmother's yard, because you guys were really close to your grandmother. And you, especially because you were born in Massachusetts and had spent more time there, you knew her a lot better. And so I took rocks from the garden and I wrote on there every trait that I saw in you guys. And I created a card out of it because I wanted you to have something that was in your house that you could look at all the time and it would say, this is who I am,
Mm.
because we all struggle with who am I as a person. Then I wrote this whole big thing about this is when I saw you being kind. This is when I saw you being loyal, because you both were at like this really difficult juncture in your lives. And I wanted you to remember that what I see in you is who you really are. Or maybe I'm just biased because I'm your mother, but like I really saw those things.
Yeah. Like I'm a very visual person. Having reminders like that is so much more helpful to me than simply like, even though I was underlining it in the book, I wasn't gonna flip back through the book and like I wanted it to be because it was above my bed. It was literally the first thing I would see every day when I would wake up, and the last thing I'd see every time I'd go to sleep. So I was like constantly absorbing different ideas and different themes. I do think that having those, however it works for you, like reminders of how far you've come is so significant because it's like watching like a puppy grow. Like
Mm-hmm.
every day, like it grows a tiny bit, and then like you're gone on vacation, you come back a couple weeks later, and you're like, oh my God, like this dog is huge. It's so hard to see like those little tiny changes every day, but when we have something to compare it to, whether it's like journaling or like whatever, it makes it so much more obvious where that progress has been and where it's come from.
I talk about on the channel for newer writers that haven't succeeded. It was really hard for me to sell my first book. And I was really the only one in my entire world that thought I could actually write a book. I would look at little lines that I had written and I knew they were good lines, like maybe one line out of an entire book, but still I knew it was a good line. And so I tell the writers that follow me that are newer, you need to put up proof of concept. Maybe you want a concept contest. Maybe you got a request from an agent. Maybe they turned you down eventually, but there was that request. There was somebody saying, this is a good idea. I want to read this. Even if it's just that you have a beautiful line that you are super proud of, it reminds you that you can do this, because writing music, performing music, writing books, sending them out in the world is very lonely, very difficult job, because you're just opening yourself up to people saying you suck.
Yeah.
So that's super important to have that, to remember.
For me, it is a review on our last album, Open Me Carefully,
Mhm.
from some stranger whose screen name was Kit Kit. No idea who this person was, but he spent a lot of time articulating just how much he appreciated and loved our music and specifically my songwriting. And so I definitely have a lot of days where I feel very insecure and I'm like, what am I
Mhm.
doing this for? Like, who is really listening to this? Like, who cares? And I'll go back and read Kit Kit's review and I'm like, I gotta keep going for Kit Kit.
Right. And your mom loves your music. So now What's Up Red, I've listened to Before You Bloom, the new EP that came out, and they called it mysterious and they loved the tones of it and the shaded intentions. And I think it is your most mature song. Like I loved the video. I loved the way that it just kind of went through the lyrics with it in the way that showed the blooming as well.
That's my own
And
handwriting
oh,
too.
is it? I love
Hmm.
that. And speaking of which, you have my handwriting on your arm.
Hmm.
Can you show the tattoo of, see, look at that.
Mom
That's
mail.
mom mail. Because when I send her mail, I put mom mail in the return address. And she got it tattooed one Mother's Day. So not really a gift for me, but it was
No, it
fun.
was definitely good for me. Like,
I tell everybody about it. But I love Before You Bloom. Like, again, you've got this hook at the beginning. Nobody knows how fast the sky goes dark. Like, it's an instant image that people get. And when you think about your life and you think about things that you go through, any person in the world, like, it can turn on a dime and all of a sudden the sky goes dark. You have this structure that every song has, I've noticed, where you create that connection with the listener. Or the sleepless nights, you wonder who you are, and some of them try to close their eyes and swear on their life they know what it's like, but they'll never know how low their soul can cost. And I like the run on with that, because it's just like all those thoughts you have in the middle of the night.
it's about like dealing with like addiction and like my experience with that. And like I've been in recovery for over 7 years now, and I don't think I had
So
ever
far.
written a song about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I think maybe like it's time. I was just like really like thinking back to like how that was and how isolating and how lonely that is. People who have never dealt with it, like
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand that. They have no
Right.
idea what it's like. Great for them that they'll never understand that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so lonely to not have like other
Right.
people to be there and like relate to you.
Right. And I agree. Like, I didn't go through like an addiction the same as you did, but I grew up in an alcoholic home and I ended up going to Al-Anon and Coda and all of those other kinds of groups, and did a 12-step program of my own that way. And it was mind blowing for me. Like, because when you have never gone through addiction, you look at people that are addicts as those people. Like, why can't they just get their act together? Why can't they just clean up? Like, you don't understand it until you sit in a room with a bunch of people that are dealing with different types of addictions. And that's what I was. I was in a room with a woman with a rage addiction, another with a sex addiction, one with an alcohol, and one with a drug addiction. And I realized that there is a commonality in every one of these people in this room. They all have a hole inside of them from whatever happened to them that they are trying to fill and
It's
stuff with
yeah,
one thing after another. So they don't have to deal with what's in the hole.
it's all self-medicating
Mm-hmm.
from trauma, from chronic illnesses that are like left untreated, from all sorts of things, but it essentially is all self-medicating.
Mm-hmm.
And it is such a shame that there is so much like stigma still around, like people saying like, oh, like it's like their choice, like blah blah blah. Like they make drugs addicting for a reason.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it's not as easy as just like, oh, you know what? Today I'm gonna stop using, and then
Right.
everything's great because all of those underlying things are still there, and now
Hmm.
you don't have that thing that you were using to cope with it anymore. What
Right.
do you think is gonna happen?
Right. But it is really hard for other people to understand the enormity of facing everything that puts you in that room in the first place.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
really is.
And like I work in the addiction field, and I help other people now who are um, trying to like be in recovery. And
Hmm.
the things that I've heard, like the reasons behind like people like starting to use like substances have been some of the most like heartbreaking, devastating, like horrifying things I've ever heard in my life. And so many people like just like didn't even have a chance. Like
Hmm.
people like things in their childhood, even as babies, happened to them. Like, and they weren't given an environment where they could process those things.
Hmm.
So it is very
Yeah.
sad, and hopefully, the language around all of that will start to change, and people will be more understanding and accepting and respectful of people.
Right. And begin to see how it is tied to our mental health and how important
Yes.
mental health is. I remember sitting in therapy and telling my therapist that all of the things that I had to process and deal with it were like this giant water balloon above my head. And I didn't even know how to even nudge it to start to empty the water up there because I was so afraid it would just crash down on me. And that weight of all that crap was enormous. And the good thing about therapy and mental health treatment and going to centers like the ones that you work at is that they help you take it out a cup at a time, just a cup at a time, and maybe you end up putting half the cup back, but you deal with it a little bit at a time until you're finally ready to conquer all of it.
Yes. I think it was RuPaul had this quote that I absolutely loved because he also had dealt with addiction in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
he said that for him, addiction was a deferment plan that he used until he was ready to face the trauma that he had on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's exactly what it was.
It gave me an insight that helped heal my relationship with my late mother. I mean, she's been gone, so I didn't get to talk to her, but helped me understand and heal that in my own heart. And then hopefully help me heal and understand what's going on in your life. So after that nice little emotional thing there, let's go back to the song with Before You Bloom. I like the whole thing with the imagery of recovery where you have there's nowhere left to run and your knuckles are white shaking at your side because anybody who has been through recovery knows that you are literally holding on by your fingertips for at least a solid 3 months before you can even think about anything other than recovery.
Hmm. A
It's
lot of
really
this
hard.
also, I was trying to use descriptions of what it's like going through withdrawals.
Hmm.
You're clenching your jaw and you plead with God, but you're left
Hmm.
alone to mourn the life you lost. The first like part of that verse, like I know how it feels to spend a night in hell when you're
Hmm.
so close to death, you don't recognize yourself. I was really trying to show like how much of a change you go through to where you don't even know who you are anymore. Like the actual like physical pain that goes along with all that as well as the emotional.
And how scary it is, right?
Yeah.
Because you are right there close to death. And that happens a lot in a lot of different types of addictions where you're just right on the edge and you don't even know how to get out of it. And I do like that you're clenching your jaw and pleading with God at the same time, which you actually can't, right? Like if you clench your jaw, you can't plead. So it's sort of showing that being closed off and also trying to ask for help. And then you're left alone to mourn the life you've lost, your head in your hands, wonder where it all went wrong. So many of these juxtapositions and dark with light and everything else is just such beautiful imagery. The other thing too that you have in here is the pain cycle with addiction. You can't face the truth of knowing what you've done. And just like we were just talking about, like it's so hard to face the fallout. It is very symbolic of your own blooming in your life, which I love and I am so proud of. And when you said 7 years in recovery, I'm just so proud because I remember the first week and I remember all the years in between. And I'm just so super proud of you if I haven't told you in the last 5 minutes.
Thank you. Some sort of like I was working with some lines about like different types of flowers that like bloom even in like
Mm-hmm.
extremely harsh conditions or just like very like resilient flowers. Because like I don't want the message to be like, yep, this sucked really bad and that like be it. Like
Right.
there is always another chapter. There's always
Hmm.
another page that you can turn to get, you can always go to a brand new life for yourself. And so
Hmm.
that was a message I really wanted to get across. Our like cover of our EP on the artwork is actually a desert lily, which is a type of flower that blooms in the desert, which I thought was
Hmm.
just like incredible.
Hmm.
Um, so that was like the meaning behind all of that and like why it worked so well is the name of our EP as well, because really the all of the music in that or so many of the songs in that EP are about horrible things that have happened in my past and now I don't recognize that person that went through that anymore.
That die before you bloom thing is super powerful because it talks about the regeneration that you were just saying, that sometimes you've got to let go of everything you knew, all the people that were in your life, the place you lived, the relationships you had, the job you had, all of that in order to get to this really beautiful place that's over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was writing this, I was keeping in mind like so many people that I like work with every day who tell me like I just feel so isolated, I feel so alone. I can't hang out with the same people anymore. Like I just stay at home by myself. I go to work by myself, and I hear that word like isolated
Mm-hmm.
more times than any other word. And but I'm seeing dozens of people a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is such a community there that is just not being, they're not able to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Right.
really wanted to, like, in my own way, like, send a message to them,
Right.
like,
Right.
there is more to this, like, there is more to your story, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to let shame weigh you down, you know?
Right. It's the same for a lot of people. And it's also something I talk about for creatives. Like there's there's a lot of shame in failure. There's a lot of shame in not making it. Like even something as simple as people will tell me, well, I've been telling my family for 5 years that I'm writing this book. So now I've got to publish it. Well, no, you don't. You can just let it go and maybe write a better one, or maybe write the 10th one, and the 10th one becomes the book that sells. Like for me, it was number 8 out of 10 that sold. And not everything I've written has succeeded. Not everything I have done in my career has succeeded. I've had huge failures. Those failures allowed room for new things to enter. And that cliche about, the door closes so another one can open is so true, as long as you are brave enough to open the next door.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Or
I
start
think,
another song or start another book. you know.
yeah, I agree.
So
We get so attached to these things that aren't working that we're blinded to something that's brand new that could work really well for us.
very true. What advice do you have for people that want to write music?
Don't think about it too much. Don't be like comparing yourself to like your favorite musician, thinking like, oh, like it has to be just like this. Most of like the huge, big musicians, they're not writing their own songs anyway. They have a whole team of people that are doing it. Um, just like be like authentic about like what you're saying. Don't think about what somebody else is going to really enjoy hearing from you. Like, what do you want to hear in a song? That's what I
Hmm.
started as. Is like I want to write music that I want to listen to.
Hmm.
Another thing is like definitely like journal or just like have like a notebook, just like anytime you think of any sort of like line or even if it's just a couple of words that you like really like write it down and just like have that available for you. I've woken up at like 3 in the morning because I was like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
that's
and
a
I
great
have to write
idea.
it down. There's nothing wrong with like getting inspiration from other people. If you're stuck trying to figure out like how am I gonna write this, compare it to like another song that like is talking about the same themes and be like, okay, how did they do it? And
Hmm.
oh, I like how they like pulled like use this more metaphor, or, like said this line or whatever. But guess really just like don't think about it and just like just write and write, and
Right.
don't get too caught up on like what rhymes and what doesn't. You can always go back and swap words out. Just get it down on a paper.
Because music is storytelling. You've got what, like maybe 100 words here, and you're telling an entire story in just these 100 words, while I take like 80,000 words to do the same thing. And that's really what it is. The best music, the music that I relate to, that I like myself, and I think that a lot of other people relate to, tells a story. I think
Yeah.
that's part of what has made Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga and people like that so popular, because they're telling a story. One of the things that we didn't touch on, but we had mentioned in our call before, the way that you sing the song can tell a different story than the story that was originally told. Because I was talking about Lady Gaga's rendition of the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood song, which is a heartbreaking rendition of it, but so well done.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like that's a huge layer. I have songs where I'm literally whispering words, or being like more timid. And that was just something I learned from some like a vocal coach I had who's like, think about like go back to like
Mhm.
what you're feeling at this time. Like literally take yourself back in time and think about like relive that moment in your head when you're singing it, and that
Mhm.
completely changed it for me. And then I had to teach her how to not cry on stage. I was like, let's dial it back a little bit. But yes, like that is like a whole other layer of being able to really get the story told, is
Mhm.
like the way that you say something, or the way even um, the melody of the notes
Mhm.
that you're singing, like because that'll put emphasis on certain words compared to others. So there's so many nuances to it, but like
Mhm.
you just got to do what like feels natural. Like if you think about it too much, it's not gonna be good.
Well, and I talk about like the white space in a book, right? The white space and the difference that it makes in the pacing of the story. And when you have like a really suspenseful part, you want it to move faster. So you can see that this is moving faster
Hmm.
intentionally because this is 2/3 of the way through the well and it's starting to get really scary. The monster is about to eat him. And so you want to get that across. And you did that in a lot of your songs, like in Before You Bloom, where you have that big, long, breathless sentence at the beginning of the song. That's exactly that anxiety that runs through your head when you're there on a sleepless night that you're talking about, and you're trying not to think about all of these things that you've done, the mistakes you've made in your life that really plague you when you're sleeping. You've captured it by the way that you structured the sentence of the song, and you do the same thing when you're writing a book. You structure things differently to capture the mood, to capture the emotion, to capture what you want the reader to feel, and you're doing that for what you want the listener to feel.
I'm not even thinking about it that way when I'm writing it,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're just like being authentic, when like writing these things down, it just happens naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Just being natural with it, like don't force anything. Like I never sit down and force myself to write lyrics
Mm-hmm.
because for me, for my process, it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then when I do feel like, okay, I need to write something, then it'll be like hours and hours and hours and hours, and I won't
Mm-hmm.
stop until it's done. Um, I don't get a lot done that way, but
But that's okay. That's your
yeah.
process. Everybody has a different process. I don't write every day like I used to before, because partly because my career goals are different now than they were before, but also because when I do write, I write a lot faster than I did before. A lot more of it's cooking in the back of my brain. So I'm more productive when I do sit down.
Mhm.
And so you have to work with what works for you. And I don't agree with what, like when people say, well, I'm just going to wait until I've done 3 years of research on this book and then I'm going to write it. That's just procrastination. That's just your fear talking. You have to actually write it, but work within the system that works for you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You have to start somewhere.
yeah, and study the people that do it well. If you want to write really great short stories or poetry or songs, then you got to study the people that really do it well and say, okay, how did they put this together? And you may not actually know the words for the how, but you can say, okay, I can see how I really got this image in the beginning. And then, oh, I feel that breathless anticipation in that in that sentence there, and how this chorus is really speaking to me. You can take those things and start developing this innate sense of what works and what doesn't. And I have seen that in the evolution of your music as you've grown and developed that sense of what works and what doesn't.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll put lots of links in the bottom to the band and to the music and to the EP. The proceeds from Before You Bloom are going to a charity in your local area that helps
Yeah.
immigrant families,
Yes.
because that's an
They're called
important.
Amani Family Services. They've been around for like a long time. Like, I don't want to be wrong. But it's definitely over 10 years.
Awesome.
And they do like a lot of services. They help people with the like legal like proceedings
Mm-hmm.
for like applying for refugee status or citizenship. They help with being like advocates for them. They do so much good for our community, and
Mm-hmm.
I really would just like wanted to highlight them with this.
We'll put some information about them below. And I think we will also put some mental health resources down below, because I think that a lot of people in the creative field deal with a lot of mental health issues. Well, thank you for being my debut interview.
You're welcome.
Nobody else will be able to live up to it, of course. They'll be like, I can't beat her daughter, for Pete's sake.
We'll see.
Thank you all for watching, and join us for the next one.